must have been doing something wrong. There's a helicopter above me, right? I pull over, and I get out of the car. There's not a sound. You can hear the crickets and all this stuff in the desert, right? And all this weird noise at night, but there was no sound. And I just looked at the light, me and my wife, for a split second, and it was gone, like instant. It was like burst gone. And it was, and that was my only encounter. I'm not saying it was a UFO from, outer space or another dimension.
Right.
But it was something I sure couldn't identify what it was from.
Right. It was definitely a strange experience.
Well, put it this way, I drove the speed limit after that, or not the speed limit, but I dropped down to what the speed limit was everywhere else. I think it was like 70. I slowed down after that. I was so shook up.
Right. Well, New Mexico is a real hot spot for UFOs, always has been.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't want to run across one, but, I listen to other talk shows. I do a lot of reading, and it just makes me wonder what is going on. The military, ceased doing their blue book, supposedly, okay? I really don't think they have. I do think that, I will say this, and I will probably get people mad at me, but I, myself, believe there is life out there. We can't be the only one. If you out there believe that we're the only life on this rock, then you're very naive. You can actually go to the people who believe that the earth is flat, because there has to be life out there. I mean, space never ends. And if space, like I had one guy who said, well, space stops. Well, how can it stop? Because whatever's stopping it is taking space, so it continues on forever.
Right. There's definitely life out there, and probably lots of life out there that's much more intelligent than we are. And this is not something that just started back in the Old West. This is something that's been going on for centuries. The Bible talks about landing flaming objects, hieroglyphics, history. All of history is riddled with images of flying saucer landing and taking off and shooting sparks and that kind of thing,
Well, look in the caves. I mean, even prehistoric man, they drew pictures like of men being on this like little flying object, like with a helmet over their head. You look at the pyramids, you look at the Sphinx, okay? They're coming to the conclusion that the Sphinx was underwater, and that puts it back, before our human race was walking on the earth. And they're starting to come out to more and more things that, hey, maybe this earth has been on a reboot. And, and like when you look at these, drawings in some of these caves, even the Indians, the native tribes in their caves, they found, again, people, flying like on objects and with helmets and wearing helmets, walking. It just makes you feel that, hey, we have been visited. And I think we are right now. And that's where I'm kind of nervous, because I think it's about time, the government should come out and tell you and me, hey, what's going on? But they don't do that. Just like in the news, I'll be honest with you. I was reading the news the other day. They said that we have a second moon. We've known about it now for like probably 3 decades, that besides our moon, there's a huge asteroid that's circling the Earth as a moon. And, that just came out. NASA actually admitted it. So, I mean, if they're slowly emitting this stuff, I mean, what are they not telling us?
Right. Well, and there's so much evidence. I mean, look at the Nazca lines in Peru. People didn't even know they existed until aircraft came into play and they could see it from the air. Until then, there's no way you could have seen it from the ground or been able to tell what it was. So, those are thousands of years old. They were definitely guide markers for craft that hovered way above the earth.
Well, let's face it, I don't think any of the architects today or any of the engineers today could even make what that is, because look how many miles long they are. And the just, the way it's laid out, when you look at it, We can't do it. So that tells you that something was there. And they certainly, how could they have ever done that on the ground without any type of sophisticated equipment? They couldn't have done it. Impossible.
Right. Right. There's some amazing things throughout the world that could not have been made by, you get the critics that say, oh yeah, no, there was a possible way they could have made this, they could have made that. No, they couldn't. The technology of the time, there's no way in the world they could have created them, because it would be an incredible struggling challenge just to try and recreate it today. Most people say that a lot of those monuments couldn't be even created today with the technology we have.
Oh, no. And you know what? Even going back to Roman times, which I know they got their mixture from making cement from somebody else, but look at the cement they used. We can't even duplicate it. Their cement actually got harder and harder and harder, where our cement gets harder for a certain period of time, and then it starts breaking down. The Romans had, it got harder, and it got harder, and it did not break down. So where did they even come up with that technology? We can't do it. We can't duplicate it with all our scientists in all the labs. We can't duplicate something as simple as the cement they made, their roads with and all that stuff with.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Well, technology, there's been so much lost. The art of levitation that was obviously used to build some of these monuments with these stones that weigh hundreds of tons apiece. You can't move those. There would be no any other way to move those. So, but that technology has been lost for thousands of years.
Okay, now one thing I do. What is your first name? I'm sorry. Hey, to the audience out here, he was scheduled to come on June 4th. And our guest for tonight actually didn't call in. I tried calling our guest all the way up to about 2 minutes to 8. I could not get a hold of Susan, and then I noticed she started calling about 4 minutes after 8. I'm sorry, Susan. I'll get back with you, but the show must go on. So I'm embarrassed to say, I know your initials from your email. Yep. I don't even know your name.
That's all right. My name's Kerry Haggard. And I live in Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, and I just wrote and published, well, I've been writing for 2 years, and just published a novel called Traveler. And it highlights and pays homage to the April 17th, 1897 Aurora, Texas alien crash, where a single alien clipped the edge of a fast-moving windmill and slammed into the water tower in Aurora, Texas.
Oh, wow. Now, I really want to keep that one, if we can, to June 4th, because I really want to promote it for you. And okay. And I think it would be a great 2-hour show just on that. But I'm more interested, too, about when you were a child and, this UFO that crashed in your little town. Afterwards, was there any rumors like guys in suits or going around talking to the neighbors or anything like that? Did you ever hear anything like that?
I didn't. But again, I was 9 years old. I wasn't out and about and all and listening for that kind of thing. I was a little kid. So I just remember clearly the buzz and the talk, and that it was in the newspaper about the medical center clinic and all of that. And like I said, we went tearing off over there to see it. And it was there, and it was still hot, and there was little splatters. It looked like if you ever melted lead and poured it out of the container and it hits the ground and splatters, or hits the asphalt or pavement and splatters. That's what it looked like. And it was little driplets of that all the way around the circle. But that circle was huge, and it was smoking. So it wasn't like smoking to the point where it had burned down into the asphalt, but it had really heated it up. So something emitting tremendous power had set down and taken off again, or at least that's what it appeared to be, in the short time that it took calls to come into the police department and a couple of police cars and a fire truck and a few civilians to show up at the scene. So that, it couldn't have been more than 7-8 minutes.
Well, it sounds like it wasn't a crash, and it sounded like it landed and maybe it was checking out your community in a way. I wonder if anybody went missing in your community at that time frame. I wonder, that's something you might want to someday dig into, because that could be a good, basis for a good book.
I never heard of that. I never heard of anybody disappearing during that time. But again, it was the same time that the UFO supposedly landed in Danielsville, Georgia, and that's a documented sighting. There's people that swore affidavits that they saw the UFO land down there. And Danielsville, Georgia, is literally 12 miles from Commerce. Right down a single straight road.
Oh, wow. So maybe what it did is it landed in your place and then took back off and then went over there and landed. What can you tell us about that, 12 miles down the road when that UFO landed? I mean, was it...
Well, it wasn't the same day, night, probably even week, but
okay.
It was during the same year. I'll look here and find it, because I've read some articles on it before.
I'm just wondering, if like in somebody's community, if a UFO came down and landed, how people would respond. On one of the old Art Bell show, the police department in some town, I think it was in Midwest or maybe in the South, I'm not really sure, but they started seeing, getting reports of UFOs. So the police department actually sent out their police cars, and they were all following this weird lights and stuff like that. They called up the Air Force Base, and the Air Force Base said, the radar operator said they did pick up something. But then towards the end of it, they kind of said, well, maybe it was Jupiter or something. But the reports were from people. They were actually calling in and saying that, they saw it over this direction. They saw it over this direction. The Air Force radar operator, when the police called, admitted that, hey, they picked up something up on radar, and they didn't know what it was. So it makes you wonder again, too. The government is not going to sit there and admit there's UFOs, not after Roswell and stuff like that, or the weather balloon, and saying, oh, is this a weather balloon? Just after they had the person who was in charge of the security of the base, admit to the news media that they had a UFO crash. So, Jesse saying that. So it kind of makes you wonder, can you trust your government? No, I don't think so. But,
right.
With UFO landings and stuff like that, it's been so many of them, like over Mexico, the reports, the hot spots in Mexico, flying objects like that, out of LA at times. It's really, there's more than just a few.
Right. The Danielsville thing happened June 1st, 1973.
Okay, and what the one that crashed in your little town was, or not crashed but landed, that was in 73, but what month?
I don't know. I don't remember. I actually called the public library when I was in the completion stages of my book and tried to get somebody to dig through the old newspapers and give me the date, but I never could. They said, oh, no, we can't go through a whole year's worth of papers. They said, you're not even sure it was 1973. I said, well, I think it is, but I couldn't get them to do it. So I don't remember when it was. It could have been in the spring, could have been in the fall. Again, I was a little kid. I don't remember. But this Danielsville thing, which is 12 miles from there, was June the 1st of 73. And I guarantee you, the one at Commerce was probably 4 or 5 months before or after. So it was a lot of activity going on there. I know there was a lot of reports from Atlanta to Macon to Savannah, all over the state and all over the country.
Oh, yeah. 73 seems like 73 and 74. I mean, there was a lot of UFO reports. A question, where you grew up was in that city or little town. Was there any military activity around their bases or anything like that?
None. The closest thing military-wise is probably 3 hours away down South Georgia.